Hello and welcome. We always think that, when we travel, we get perspective into other cultures and other people and how they live. But when you actually work in countries, you get true insight. I have always admired people who not only travel, but work in countries not in a superficial corporate job where they don't get exposed to the local population, but work at the grassroots level, bringing high impact projects that changes people's lives. Our guest today is somebody like that. Highly accomplished individual that has worked not just in America, his home country, but in Latin America, in Afghanistan, and most recently in Indonesia. His wealth of experience on how he navigates life in various countries and life in the CSR and giving world will be a very invaluable guide to all young students watching this. With that, I welcome Jeff Cohen, my friend and the former US Director for USA to Indonesia. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, Nalan, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. So, talk us through how you navigate through various countries. I mean, it's tough, right? There is a language, there is culture, there is preconceived notions about Americans. There's so many things, stereotypes. How do you deal with that? Because unlike a corporate job, you're not tenured there for 5, 10 years. You know you're going to go out in 3 years, and you have to make an impact in that. So, how do you do that?
Well, thank you, Nalan. I've had the luck over the arc of my career to be posted in lots of different places. And early on, as a young student, I knew I wanted to learn another language. In the United States, it's not as common for Americans to speak multiple language unless they come from a different culture. But I wanted to learn Spanish. So I actually moved to Spain and learned Spanish. And so when I became a professional after getting my master's degree in international studies, uh, I knew that I wanted to serve, and I wanted to serve in a way that would provide benefits to mankind in positive ways. And so I joined the United States Peace Corps, and the first place I went to was Bolivia. Now, I already spoke Spanish, but interestingly enough, in the village that I was assigned to, the locals speak an indigenous language. And so it was kind of strange because I was speaking Spanish as a second language, and so were they, which kind of made us communicate in an interesting way. And we had a shared experience there. And I think as I traveled the world, it's finding those shared experiences that are so critical to understanding that while culture may be different, traditions may be different, surroundings and local context is different, there are a lot of things at the base of humanity that are the same. We all want our families to be healthy. We all want our children to grow up happy and to have access to education. And when you break down some of those barriers to the most basic, you find those commonalities. And once you do that, you can build forward. As I've gone across the world in Latin America and Afghanistan and out here in Indonesia, I think one of the best tools in my toolkit is being open to new experiences, to new food, culture, being welcoming of that, understanding that it's different, but embracing the positive things, and also recognizing that not all things that you find that are different are positive, but that's okay. For example, I love the Indonesian batik. These are batiks. Behind me, you'll see some batiks, but I really don't like Jakarta traffic, and I think that's universal. But you find things you like, you find things you don't. You focus in on the positive, and that helps you adapt more quickly.
Well, you like the traffic in my hometown of Bangalore even lesser. I have the privilege of traveling from Jakarta to Bangalore twice a month, from one worst traffic to the worst traffic. Uh, just the traffic from home to the airport takes longer than the flight from Jakarta to Bangalore.
Wow, that sounds bad.
So, just picking up from where you left, young students travel to study overseas all the time. I know you have young children doing the same. When they go there, they go into an environment where they're expected to adapt. And sometimes they often land up working in the same country for some time. Sometimes they're bound to by the rules of their visa. So, what are the top 2 or 3 things a person can do to adjust to a new country? Now, some of it, not in a superficial way, which sounds touristy and a little flaky. But what can they do to develop genuine? Okay, I'm here. I know I'm an outsider, but I would like to belong. How do you do that?
Well, I think first and foremost is making a valid attempt to learn that local language.
Okay.
For me, it was Spain, that my overseas study program, and learning Spanish was important. There were a lot of Americans on my program who just wanted to have fun. My roommate and I decided that we both wanted to learn Spanish. And so we made it a priority and we joined a local gym. By joining a local gym, you meet the people in the neighborhood. You do a healthy activity, which is, working out, but finding that one thing that is very local, and something where you can be an outsider but become accepted by the neighborhood or the town or the city that you're living in, I think is important. And it's not superficial. It sounds superficial to join a gym, but we went to that gym every day, saw the same people, they got used to us, and we built a network of friends that I still have today. In fact, I just saw one when I was visiting my daughter on her overseas study in Spain. It had been 32 years since I saw him, and it was just like yesterday because we built that foundation of friendship that's really important. So, students that are studying overseas and may need to spend more time, or even while they're studying, you've got to embrace the culture. You've got to do things that are normal to that culture, become a part of it. Sometimes it's sharing food, sometimes it's playing sports, sometimes it's playing video games or board games. Some way that people entertain themselves outside of the school or work context so that you can feel more part of society. I would say that joining a religious group for those that are practicing, or a hobby group, or a theater group, whatever your passion is in your home country, you should be able to express that and also find ways to share your culture. I spent a lot of time in the places I've lived cooking for my friends and colleagues American style barbecue because it's something I like to do and they appreciate it, and it was a way to share. And so I think there are lots of ways that are not superficial but are also fun that you can utilize to adapt to local cultures and become more effective and efficient.
And that's very good advice. Now, a lot of global movement happens for work reasons. People travel and relocate and work all over. There's a large mass of Chinese, Indian, now Indonesian, who are working in Europe, America, etc. So while local language is important, what is your take on the global language of business, that's English? How proficient should one be in that for a career
Well,
outside of their home country?
yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious that English is the language that goes all around the world in any country, and you can do business. I was lucky that I was born in America and English is my native tongue. I chose Spanish because of the countries where you speak Spanish and also how important it is in America, in the United States, to be able to speak Spanish because of the large group of immigrants that live in the United States. But I think you can't, if you're Chinese or or you're Indonesian, I think the best first language for anybody is English. It's not the only one, but it really is much more universal than other languages. It's been a way for me to connect with people from a third culture in a way that I think has been constructive and positive.
So maybe you can tell us from your personal experience as well, whether the career chose you or you chose the career. But for young people wanting to get into a career of service, of the CSR, sustainability, areas where you serve mankind, how does one do that? What does one study? What do they do?
Well, I think you can study just about anything and use that to serve. If I had become a nurse or studied law, I could have found a way to still serve mankind through the work that my organization, USAID, has done all over the world. And so it's not so much about what you study, it's about how you apply that to a new environment. I was a salesman a long time ago, and I learned that while I was good at it and I could have made a lot of money, it didn't fulfill me. And so you asked the question, did the job choose you or did you choose the job? When I was in graduate school in California, I met 40 what are called returned Peace Corps volunteers. They had just finished their service and then they were then getting a master's degree. I was doing it the opposite way. And they told me about serving the American people by being a volunteer overseas and at the same time serving the local community. And I was intrigued and I wanted to try it. And so I think they're telling their stories to me about how much fun it was and how much they learned and how much it fulfilled them made me want to do it. When I got to Bolivia, I learned the value of being a foreigner in a new place, learning the culture and sharing your culture, but also focused on that very grassroots development of how can local government provide for its people. And I was hooked. I had found my calling, the thing that I wanted to do, and it wasn't easy to keep finding positions for me to keep doing that. But staying overseas was one of the ways to do it. I think, of course, you can study international development, which is one of the fields that I studied, or you could study public health, or you could study agriculture, you could study, biology. There are lots of different ways to get to that service, and there are a lot of different ways to serve. And I think corporations these days are learning that building sustainability and corporate social responsibility, and they're different. Having a sustainable model in production, in sales, in how you utilize commodities is one thing. Sometimes corporate social responsibility is for the workers in that company to be able to give back in a way that's very personal through volunteering at the local orphanage or at the, the local animal shelter. I think that either of those ways that you find the ability to serve others, you're going to find much more fulfillment in that job than you might elsewhere. And now that's personal, that's me. I find fulfillment of coming to work every day where my job is to try to organize my team to provide health care to the most needy or vaccines to those that need it or upskilling for Indonesian youth that want to learn how to cloud compute so they can get better jobs. That's what fulfills me. And I think that if there are students interested in those types of careers, they're out there. And you can study almost anything, but you really got to focus in on the organizations that really have the values and the desire to do more in sustainability and corporate social responsibility.
It's interesting you mentioned cloud computing for Indonesian young people. We did that as a project with you. So thanks for mentioning that. That was a very, very good project, and we did complete it.
You
And
did an exceptional job at it. So good that I think you're getting more business elsewhere, and I wish you nothing but the best. It's really important for young people, and not just young people. I think I need to continuously be upskilled. I'm learning how to use AI these days because it's essential for the job market, and it's important for all areas of work, whether it is upskilling, whether it is corporate social responsibility. You have to learn the tools of the trade. I mean, where would we have been 40 years ago if we didn't learn how to use computers? And 20 years ago if we didn't learn how to adapt to use hand phones and cellular phones? And now we need to adapt and use the tools of today.
that's true. That's so true, especially midlife individuals who tend to get laid off the most across the world. They need to upskill constantly to stay ahead. Because if they have not made the leap to the topmost tier at board level, then they're more or less the top target group to get laid off. And that's the time they are at the peak of their responsibilities in terms of mortgages, children's college education, thinking of their own retirement, etc. But moving on, okay, somebody studies anything or studies public policy, health, and gets into the service. This is not your typical job. So, for example, most of the places where you would have projects like this are in difficult places: Latin America, Asia, Southeast Asia, Africa. These are not your typically what people assume to be, the Western nations where life is easier, there is infrastructure, there is the work-life balance concepts, etc. These are difficult places. Sometimes you are also challenged from a security perspective. Sometimes you're faced with open health issues, and sometimes you're faced with such distressing sights that it may scar you emotionally. How does one prepare for this? Because it's not like going to office and signing a few checks, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've been in some tough spots, war zones, in fact, and seen some things that have left scars. But I think you learn to be resilient. You learn your limitations. You also understand what motivates you and what inspires you to continue to forge ahead. For me, in my field, I spent a lot of time in the office. working on paperwork and reading studies and writing strategies and dealing with host government officials. But the most important piece for me was getting out to the field, to the community level, where USAID would fund a project with coffee farmers or cacao farmers, or that clinic in the middle of nowhere where USAID provided COVID-19 vaccines. When you get to that community level and you realize that paperwork I'm doing, that agreement I'm signing with the minister, all that effort on the back end is really about those people who are the most vulnerable, the most needy, and the most marginalized that are expecting your project to provide them with benefits. And when you connect those benefits with that work in the office, it's really fulfilling. When you're in a challenging security environment, everything is much more intense and there's urgency because you never know if the thing you're working on is going to solve a problem that will lead to a more peaceful solution. And that was always the consequence of our actions in Afghanistan. We thought if we did this right, we could solve this problem and hopefully get another year of peace. In the end, it was a challenging prospect and didn't end the way we had hoped. But there's still hope because more people continue to work on those complex issues, whether it's the Congo or Afghanistan or in Somalia. There's a lot of folks interested in those challenging environments because there's also a lot of work that needs to be done to provide people with the basics and also opportunities.
That's true. But while one can cope with this themselves, how does one manage the family while you're shifting into multiple countries? There's children's education, there's fear of security, etc. So how does one manage that? I mean, uh,
Well, like all family things, it's a team, right? And the team has to the team has to have a shared goal and shared values. And in my life, I was lucky that I have a wife and kids who have been flexible and adaptable and willing to try new things. Now, they didn't always love every place we went right away, but they got accustomed to it and adapted. I think the key is when it's a security situation, an insecure environment, sometimes your family doesn't get to go with you. In my case, my family didn't go to Afghanistan with me, and I spent 3.5 years there total. But I took frequent breaks and went back to see them in the United States often. But you have to have a plan. For that, I had to make sure that I was talking to my wife on the phone every morning and every evening. We treated it like it was my commute in Washington to and from work, where we would spend that hour together traveling to work. In this case, I was spending an hour together on the phone or on a video chat so that you had that constant engagement. When we travel together overseas, of course, you're worried about schools, you're worried about food, you're worried about health. And, if you're willing to take the risks, and there are risks, it can be really rewarding. And, people always say high risk, high reward. That's true. Our favorite place that we've served and has been Lima, Peru. And it was a place where both my kids learned to speak Spanish, and my wife got to do what she loves, which is engage athletically with tennis. And I did the work that I love. And so we were all the happiest together there. There are other places that we loved as well, but that was probably the one where the four of us were together the longest.
I do believe that if family is adopted, the children later in life will realize what an invaluable experience they had as they meet people who've never been out of their town, state, or country. How much they learned while they were young just by things that didn't seem that much fun in the beginning.
Yeah. No, that's true. There's a lot of what we call foreign service kids, kids like me, or expat kids that are Americans that go back to the United States and they go to college and they're the only ones that ever had a passport, or maybe the only ones that have seen, a village in rural Africa. To people from where I'm from, they would never have. They don't even know what it might look like. They only see it on movie screens, which sometimes happens. People on the other side, they only see America on movie screens, and so
So,
it's always interesting to bridge those contextual differences.
yeah, it's always interesting when people look through the lens of stereotype, while the rest of the world looks at American movies and thinks life must be like this. And it's just like, we're coming from India. People who see Indian movies think we dance around trees to date each other, which we don't do, or there are snakes on the street, which we don't have.
Wait, what? You don't do that? Oh
No,
no.
no,
I'm disappointed now.
we never did. We are very conservative. But I don't know how we got to 1.5 billion people. But we're very conservative. So let's dig a little bit about to what would you consider to be your most challenging project. So you've had a very checkered career, 20 plus years, and I have seen you firsthand in Indonesia for nearly three of those. Absolutely enthusiastic, this driven uh, leadership on the ground, hands on. But what was your most challenging project?
Uh, I've had a lot of challenging projects. Uh, I think the most fun and challenging have been where you're taking multiple stakeholders and trying to find a way to get them to work together. USAID has some simple models where you give a grant to an organization and they do the project. And it's that project, that grantee is doing it themselves. And sometimes they have sub awards to other folks, but it's relatively simple. But when you're bringing in government and you're bringing in the private sector and you're bringing in local communities and maybe bringing in another development partner like FCDO, the Brits or the Aussies or somebody, another organization, the World Bank, trying to get those folks aligned, coordinated strategically, making sure everyone's interests is understood, and that you find that sweet spot, that concentric circle middle ground where you can operate effectively. Those are challenging. They take a long time, but they're also really rewarding. Um, I'll give you a quick example, and this is very American, but also very Dominican. In the Dominican Republic, baseball is the most popular sport, American baseball. Dominicans make up, I don't know, a huge number of professional baseball players in the American Professional Baseball League called the MLB. And when I was in the Dominican Republic, my boss was a baseball fan, and we'd been talking about doing something with all these baseball players and the American teams that had training centers in the Dominican Republic. And so he tasked me with putting together some sort of project. And it took 2 years, a lot of work over 2 years, but eventually we got 6 local organizations, the government of the Dominican Republic through their Ministry of Sports, Major League Baseball out of New York, Major League Baseball Players Association, which was their union, a bunch of Major League Baseball teams like San Diego Padres and the Detroit Tigers, and players, Dominican players who wanted to give back to their communities. And we got them working together, and it was really challenging because it took a long time, but very fulfilling. And that project lived on for many, many years between USAID, Major League Baseball, and all of these different entities. But to me, that was extremely challenging, but also extremely rewarding.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I hear you, right? The three things that I hear very clearly to adapt into a new country: the local language, sport of some kind connects, and food. Now, you have been blogging about food all over Indonesia. Is that a conscious strategy or just out of interest?
Yeah, no, it was a conscious strategy because one, I like to eat, and Indonesian food is delicious. I like spicy food. And Indonesians are very proud, not just nationally, but locally. If you're in Aceh, you have Acehnese food that's very important, and sambal, the spice, that spicy, condiment that goes with the food. If you're in Bali, there's another series of food options and another kind of sambal. My favorite is sambal mata, which is from Bali. Anyways, USA does projects all over the country. And in social media, from what I understand, you have veggies and sweets. And the veggies are, we're doing this project in tuberculosis, and we're with the Minister of Health, and we're at this clinic, and that's a veggie. And you want people's attention to that. But in order to get more attention, you put in some sweets. So if I went to, let's say, Makassar, and I was talking about an upskilling program at the university there, UNHAS or the National University, I would also go with a local famous person or a government official or perhaps somebody visiting from Washington, and I would go and eat local food. In Makassar, which is in South Sulawesi, you got to eat choto Makassar. It's the local fare and it's delicious. And so I would make a video and I would talk to this person. In that case, when I was eating choto Makassar, was a young woman that had gotten a scholarship from USAID and was now working in public health. And so she and I engaged in the video and we ate choto Makassar and we had a wonderful chat. But the point was to draw more attention to the trip I made to visit the upskilling work that we were doing at UNHAS on STEM education, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and also some of the upskilling work we were doing with Amazon Web Services in another university. Those were the veggies. And so everywhere I went, I would do both. I would do a video of me engaging with the local community, with the local political gentry, with the local private sector, signing stuff and taking endless pictures. But I would also do those food vlogs of eating local food and talking about it. And of course, I'm a diplomat, so everything I ate was enak sakali, which means delicious. Sometimes, well, you'll never see a video of me eating durian because not a big fan.
Well, I'm vegetarian, so my options get limited. But coming to the last segment, every generation speaks about the previous generation as being, or our generation speaks about the next generation as being lazier, and our parents probably said the same thing about us. But I want to get perspective on both sides. What is the one or two things you see in the current generation which are huge positives that we didn't have? And what are the couple of things that we would like to see because employers keep saying people are not job ready? So what are the 2 or 3 good things that this generation has going for them? And 2 or 3 things that they really need to pick up, maybe even from the past?
Well, I've got an 18-year-old son and a 22-year-old daughter, and my daughter just entered the job market. My son is about to enter college. And so I've seen their generation grow up, right, personally in my household. And I think what I can say positive about their generation is that they're inquisitive. They don't take anything at face value. They ask questions. They want to get to the heart of, well, how do you know that? And because information is so available, they can look stuff up. So you can't really, pull one over on them because they're going to find the truth if they do a little bit more research. And I think that's important. My daughter knows details about things that I never could because she had access in her university and on her phone to information that would have taken me, a week to find through, going through a library and looking through books. And it's just easier now to get access to information. What I would say are some of the skills that are most important, and these go back well before my time and my dad's time, is, shake people by their hand and look them in the eye and be true to your word. If you say you're going to do it, then do it and do it well. And I think that cuts across all generations. I think you need to be confident. You need to have soft skills. You need to be emotionally intelligent, and you need to know what that means. You have to be self-aware, and you have to know your strengths and your weaknesses. And in all work settings, whether they're virtual or in offline, you've got to get along with people. You have to be, if you're an introvert, sometimes you got to turn up your extrovert so that you can engage people. If you're an extrovert like me, sometimes you got to turn it down because it can put people off. And so being self-aware and being cognizant of how to change is really, I think, important.
That's very sage advice. You were speaking at the start of this segment about how they can check everything and they want to check everything. Curiosity, and that's a very good skill to have. But it also, on a lighter vein, puts us on the spot. Because when my grandfather said something, we believed it because he said it. It's true. We say something, I think my grandchildren are going to look up my life on the internet and say, no, this didn't happen this way. So, but what you said later is even more important, and we'll end with that if you say what you do and do what you say, you will really build credibility and build a good life. Thank you very much, Jeff. It's been wonderful to have you here. You're always a good speaker. You always speak from the heart. You're candid and insightful, and that comes from the wisdom gained over the multi-country experience that you have, the hands-on work that you do, and your engagement with the local population. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nalan. See you soon.